Tulsi Gabbard went away from the national conversation a little bit. She was serving in the military in Africa, and there's been a giant transition in the stuff she cares about, the stuff she chooses to focus on, and she is now right smack dab in the middle of going on a Fox News tour of wrongness. Now, I covered some tweets of hers previously that were really eyebrow-raising. This is effectively her doubling down on those tweets and her adding another layer of wrongness. Take a look.
Joining me now, someone who's been following the border disaster from day one, former Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi, I'm just really disgusted with what the president said about those border agents on horseback. Everybody with a brain knows that there was no whipping of migrants going on. So what do you think's happening? Why is he saying that it did and threatening to punish the agents?
Jesse, the issue here, and I consider Joe Biden a friend, but he's absolutely wrong. And he needs to apologize to the American people for saying what he said. And here's why. You know, he's somebody who's been very outspoken as being against autocrats, autocracies, dictators. But what he essentially did was act as judge, jury, and executioner for these Customs and Border Patrol agents on horseback. How can they expect to have any kind of fair outcome to an investigation when the President of the United States has already declared their guilt and that they will be punished? And the bigger issue here that this points to, which is one that we all need to be concerned about, is that if we are no longer a country of laws, if we are no longer a country where we know we will be presumed innocent unless proven guilty, then we don't have a democracy. And that's the increasing feeling that a lot of us have, is that we are losing our democracy and moving closer and closer to what essentially is an autocracy.
You said the Biden-Harris open door policy has been a disaster. It needs to end now. The main beneficiaries of open borders are the gangs, cartels, and human traffickers. The Trump policy of having people wait on the other side of the border worked and needs to be reinstated. Your thoughts about what's happening in Del Rio and how the administration is handling it?
It is an utter disaster and failure, and it's directly attributed to the Biden-Harris administration's open border policy. This is not only a humanitarian crisis, it is a national security crisis, and it's something I've said all along, which is that if we do not secure our borders, then we can't have a secure nation. Well, as you know, Brett, in both East and West Africa, there is a surge of these jihadist terrorists. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and affiliated groups are increasing in their strength. The withdrawal from Afghanistan is something that I agreed with, but unfortunately, the way that this administration executed that withdrawal has been an utter and abject disaster, which is continuing to play out as we speak. For those who say, and we should continue to monitor Afghanistan to make sure that there are no Al-Qaeda and ISIS strongholds that are allowed to start to take root. If we're seeing that that's starting to happen, then we need to go and take them out. But we should not be under the illusion that this is a problem that's only limited to Afghanistan.
Oh boy, where do I begin? Let's start with the Afghanistan war stuff, because this is really important and this got under my skin quite a bit. When Biden did the withdrawal from Afghanistan, as of right now, as of right this second, we have actually fully withdrawn from Afghanistan. Understand something. I was wrong. I didn't think Biden would fully withdraw from Afghanistan. I thought he would do the same thing Trump did, which is cuck himself to the military-industrial complex, and even best case scenario, maybe pretend like we withdrew while keeping a residual 500 or 1,000 troops on the ground. Biden didn't do that. Biden fully withdrew from Afghanistan. I give him massive credit on that front. Do you have any idea the nerve it takes, the balls it takes to stand up to the military-industrial complex, to stand up to the deep state, the intelligence agencies, the CIA, the Pentagon, who every step of the way are whispering in your ear, this is wrong, this is not okay, this is a disaster, you're making the United States less safe, we need to stay there, we have to stay there. Do you have any idea the amount of, hey, fuck off, that you have to have in you in order to stand up to every wing and faction of the establishment? specifically on the issue of Afghanistan, that's what Joe Biden did. You know what else? To successfully evacuate 100,000 people from Afghanistan in what, a 2-week time frame? Do you have any idea how difficult that is? The logistics of that? Do you have any idea how difficult it is to coordinate, as we did, with the Taliban, so that the Taliban actually provided safe passage for Americans to the airport to get them out of Afghanistan? Do you have any idea the high level of coordination that you need in order to make that happen? Do you have any idea? Now, of course, there was the airport bombing. That was from ISIS. The bombing not only killed our civilians or our soldiers, it also killed Taliban operatives, because ISIS has positioned themselves against the Taliban here as well. So we were dealing with the Taliban, and it was ISIS who did that bombing. Now, the worst thing Biden did was the war crime in response to that, which is killing 10 civilians, including 7 children. It was an aid worker. It was the revenge strike, the retribution strike. He wanted to make sure, I don't look soft on terrorists, let me do this. That's a war crime. Now, we covered a segment where Tulsi talked about that. She didn't spend any time saying, whoa, that's a war crime. People need to go down. Tucker threw her a softball, criticized the people who killed the civilians. You know, say there needs to be accountability on that. What did she do? She didn't do that. She pivoted right to Islamism bad, jihadism bad, and we need to keep up the fight and use air power. This is what happens when you use air power. They don't have the high-level intelligence. We can't kill a gnat from 100 miles away with a laser-guided bomb. That doesn't happen. She didn't do that. So she's not criticizing the one thing that's really worthy of criticism, but she is criticizing. She says, the withdrawal is something I agreed with, but, I agreed with the withdrawal, but, this is like my favorite, I agree with free speech, but, no but. The withdrawal is something I agree with, but the way it went down was an utter and abject disaster. Was it? Was getting 100,000 people out of there an abject disaster? Was leaving 0 boots on the ground an abject disaster? That looks like one of the best things he ever did to me. Now, why am I so animated about this? Why am I so annoyed about this? Tulsi Gabbard positioned herself as, I'm the anti-war candidate. That's who I am. I'm the one who's taking a principled stance against, the war hawks. Joe Biden did that on the issue of Afghanistan, and you're nowhere to be found defending him. What, you thought it was everything was going to go perfectly smoothly, and there was going to be no ISIS attack, there was going to be no other issues. Of course, the military-industrial complex and the propaganda machine that is the establishment media, of course they were going to nitpick every nook and cranny of the withdrawal because they don't want to withdraw. They want to keep us there. They want to jack the natural resources, the trillions of dollars in mineral wealth, the opium. The military-industrial complex wants those profits. Of course they were going to blow everything out of proportion. Duh. They're overly critical of the withdrawal, which was the most organized and best part of the war itself. But no, she doesn't make any of these points. She doesn't point out, where was the media outrage when we allied ourselves with warlords with child sex slaves? Where was that? Where was the outrage when the Afghan papers came out? And we learned about how the whole war was a farce. Nobody knew what they were doing any step of the way. Where was the outrage there? I don't see any of it. Instead, the bulk of the commentary is, the way it went down was an utter and abject disaster. So that I'm the anti-war candidate is not actually making a defense of the anti-war president on the issue of Afghanistan. I'm very clear on the issue of Afghanistan because Biden is still horrendous on Syria. He's still horrendous on Iraq. He's still horrendous on a number of foreign policy fronts. Didn't even get back in the Iran deal when he could have and he should have. But on the issue of Afghanistan, Biden did the right thing. And nobody's defending him. Even the candidate who was like, I'm the anti-war candidate, the bulk of the commentary is bashing him on that front. What happened, Tulsi? What happened? What happened? You tell me. I'm asking you. What happened? What happened? Okay, I got more for you. So let's run through it. She says, why is Biden punishing those agents? The criticism I have of Biden is that he didn't punish the agents enough. You know what happened? They said, we're no more agents on horseback. No more agents on horseback, as if the horses were the main problem. The horses weren't the main problem. The problem is they were using the horse reins as a whip, and they were threatening people, and they were aggressive. And those people, listen, you can criticize what's going on at the southern border. I have criticisms, of course, of what's going on at the southern border. But don't pretend like the Haitians carrying food back from Mexico were a direct and imminent threat to the Border Patrol agent on fucking horseback. Don't make that argument. And she's saying, why is Biden punishing those agents? She says, Biden needs to apologize to the American people. He says he's against dictators, but he's acting as judge, jury, and executioner for the Border Patrol agents. Excuse me, Tulsi. Joe Biden is the head of the executive branch of our government. This is an executive agency that he's responsible for. The buck stops with him. If he wants to fire somebody who's under his command and control, who's an employee of him and the executive branch, he has every right to do it. This has nothing to do with a judicial process. Innocent until proven guilty. Nobody's on trial here, Tulsi. They are the employee. He is the boss. He's saying, you're not acting in the way that I think is acceptable and respectable. Now, he didn't fire them. I wish he did fire them. He should fire them. Unless I missed something, maybe he fired them and I didn't see it. But that's what I would have done. You're acting far too aggressive. The Border Patrol agent very clearly said something to them like, this is why your country is shit, because you treat your women like this. Something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. I didn't hear every word of it, but that's the gist of it. That's acceptable to you? That's okay? That's professional? Now, regardless of what you think of what's happening at the southern border with the Haitian refugees coming in, we know there was just a coup in that country. There was an earthquake. There were multiple natural disasters. There's no opportunity. People, they're desperate. Tulsi, if you were in that country with your family, you would want to flee too. But your concern is for the Border Patrol agent who's being very aggressive and threatening them as they come in, just carrying food from Mexico because they want to eat to survive? What are you talking about? What are you doing? She says, we're losing our democracy. This is like an autocracy. Now, the hilarious part about this, she says, we're losing our democracy. This is like an autocracy because Biden is saying, hey, this person who's my employee needs to be disciplined and do the right thing. And we need some sort of disciplinary action because that's not acceptable what they did. She's saying, well, that like somehow violates due process, even though this has nothing to do with the judicial process at all. This is the boss and the employee, and he's saying you're not acting the right way, which is totally fair. She says, that's why we're losing our democracy, because Biden is acting like a dictator by doing that. In other words, he's acting like a dictator and an autocrat, not because he's totally getting rid of any semblance of due process for the migrants and the refugees. Tulsi, that's the real criticism. The real criticism is you're using Title 42 to deport people immediately without any due process. That's dictator-like. That's authoritarian. She doesn't have any criticism on that front. In fact, quite the opposite. She just flat out misstates. I mean, probably lying, but I'll just be kind and say she misstates what's going on at the border, because she says, oh, Biden and Harris have an open border policy, and it's a national security crisis. What's going on here? We'll get back to the national security point in a second. But, oh, it's an open border policy. Open border policy? Title 42, the whole idea behind Title 42 is the federal government says, this is a pandemic, there's a health crisis, we're not even going to have due process because we can't, because there's a health crisis, we're just going to deport you immediately. How many people did Trump deport using Title 42? 400,000 in his 4 years in office. How many people have Biden and Harris deported just to this point using Title 42? 690,000 people. That is the opposite, the polar opposite of an open border. That is, not only is it not an open border, we're going to give you no due process, no day in court, no hearing. We're just going to deport you, no questions asked. She calls this an open border. I mean, look, that's probably a lie. I'll be kind and say she doesn't know. And so she sees people waiting under the bridge and she says, well, we must have an open border because there are people under the bridge. Either way, it's inexcusable. Whether it's a lie or just a misstatement, either way, it's fucking wrong. Now, the reason I'm leaning towards calling it a lie now is because people told her when she did that tweet 3 or 4 days ago, everybody in the response was like, what the fuck are you talking about? He's deported 690,000 people immediately. No due process. That's the real criticism, is give them due process. She's not, I'm sure she saw a lot of this stuff. She's not responding to it. She's not correcting the record. She's not saying, whoa, it's not an open border policy at all. My bad. You want to criticize Biden? Fine. I criticize Biden all the time. Do it accurately. Do it in a factual way. She's not doing it in a factual way at all. At all. And then the final thing is she says, oh, this is a national security crisis. A national security crisis? Listen, I told you guys a million times. I fancy myself a moderate on the issue of immigration. I think borders are totally fine to have. I think it's fine to enforce your laws. I think what we need is a humane, altruistic, reasonable, rational, logical process where we determine who gets to stay here and who doesn't get to stay here. I would send more resources to the border, more immigration judges, and I'd have a fair process set up that's solid, okay? So I'm a moderate on the issue of abortion. So I'm not some like far lefty on this and I'm effectively arguing to open the borders up or whatever. But what she's saying here is some right-wing bullshit. It's a national security crisis. How's it a national security crisis? Why? Is Al-Qaeda sneaking in the southern border with Haitians? Is that what's happening? Is there any evidence of that whatsoever? Of course not. There's no Al-Qaeda. There's no ISIS. There's no evidence any of these people are gang members who are coming here specifically to cause destruction or whatever. That's some right-wing trope bullshit. Oh, black people are coming to the southern border, so they must be violent. Or they're migrants and refugees, and their country was just destroyed by a coup and multiple natural disasters, and so we need to react to this responsibly and accordingly. Again, you could be rational and logical and have rules while also being altruistic and humanitarian and reasonable and embracing people's civil liberties and rights and due process. There's not a hint of that in her commentary at all. It's just going full right-wing on this crap. So, man, it's really pathetic. She went away from the national spotlight for a little bit, comes back and just goes hard on, like, a right-wing push. And everybody can see it. There were even people who were very hard defenders of Tulsi previously who now are just like, oh, well, I see what's happening now. That's right. You do. And everybody does. So, pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. And expect more. I'm bracing myself for even more of like a Dave Rubin shift from Tulsi. Total ideological transformation in a short time span. And, you know, it leads you to question, why? Why? Do I think you're having a genuine change of heart on a variety of different issues? For adults, that's very rare. If you tell me that there's 2 or 3 issues where you've genuinely evolved over time and you've changed your mind and you thought about it a lot, you've been presented counter evidence, and you're like, hey, I don't have a concrete slab where my brain is supposed to be, so I changed my mind on this. That's called being an adult. That's called evolving. But if you tell me down the line of most of the political issues in the time span of like a year, I totally flipped, I say, that looks opportunistic. That doesn't look like you had a real transformation. So it's very sad to see.